What has gin got to do with churches? Well, here in Hampshire, our chalk streams feed church fonts as well as watercress beds and gin distilleries. Our downland flowers inspire church architects with their beautiful decorations and also provide the botanicals for flavouring gin. My name is Maria Watson and I'm a Churches Conservation Trust volunteer. I live and work in Hampshire and I love the way our county hides its beautiful churches and natural treasures to its leafy heart. I'm going to take you on a virtual gin trail to show you some of these beautiful churches and also to visit some gin distilleries, and I hope on the way uncover some of the beautiful natural treasures hidden away. The trail begins here, high on the South Downs at Holy Trinity Church, Privet. This church, beautiful and opulent, was built in Victorian times by the Nicholson family, who lived in some style at nearby Basing Park. To find out more about the Nicholson family, I'm going to introduce you to Teresa Brown.
Good morning and welcome to Privet.
So what did the Nicholson family do for Privet?
When William Nicholson first came to Privet and bought the estate, he built all the new cottages for his workers and a new school, and with a schoolhouse attached, of course, a splendid church.
Fine wooden doors with their intricately decorated wrought iron hinges open into a spacious, light and airy church faced with sand-coloured and pink stonework. There are Italian marble mosaics on the floor and stained glass windows made by the finest craftsmen of the day.
They must have had deep pockets to afford all of that. How did the Nicholsons make their money?
Well established in the gin distilling business, and the family had been distilling gin for well over 100 years, and this is the Nicholson Gin that they distilled in London, and today the members of the family are distilling gin again.
But gin was called Mother's Ruin.
Here's a print by William Hogarth called Gin Lane. It was issued in 1751 and designed to show the evils of the gin craze which had overtaken Britain, especially London, during the previous 50 years. Hogarth's satire helped to force the government into action, passing a Gin Act which raised the duty on gin and forbade jails and workhouses from selling it. So how can we reconcile how the Nicholsons made their money in London with their philanthropy here in Privet?
Well, I think he was a very kind and caring employer and quite a generous man, as you can see from this village today, and he supported his workers really well here in Privet. And if the family needed clothing, the family helped out. And indeed, even if they were unwell, he paid the doctor's fees. So he was a really good employer. And likewise with his distilleries in London, I believe they looked after their employees there. And as you may know, that there was a tragedy at the Three Mills distillery where Godfrey Nicholson, who was the managing director there at the time, lost his life in trying to save one of the employees.
Thank you, Teresa.
As we drive from Holy Trinity Privet to the next church on the trail, we'll pass Longbarn Lavender in New Alresford. Lavender thrives on the dry, chalky soil of the Hampshire Downs and can be distilled to make an oil to scent cosmetics or soap. It can also be added to a gin still to impart a distinctive flavour. Gin is distilled from wheat spirit and predominantly flavoured with juniper berries. Wild juniper also grows on the uplands of Hampshire and on the shoulders of the M3 motorway. Over 1,000 wild juniper bushes have been propagated from local plants and planted on the cutting at Twyford Down. St Mary's Itchen Stoke is also a Victorian church, but it has a very different style to Holy Trinity. You can see from the diamond-shaped slates on the roof, the open belfry and the elegant stained glass windows in the apse that this is a miniature French Gothic cathedral set in the Hampshire countryside. Built in 1866, in fact it's modelled on Sainte-Chapelle, the Holy Chapel in Paris.
Here's local historian Glenn Gilbertson, who's going to tell us the story of the stained glass windows in this church. Who gave the stained glasses to the church?
Well, the stained glasses were given by Hortense, Lady Ashburton, the wife of the third Lord Ashburton. Her father was a French duke, which sounds like an ancient family, but in fact he was a revolutionary who'd served very prominently under Napoleon.
How well have the stained glass windows been cared for in recent years?
Well, recently there was work being done on the belfry, and beautiful as the windows looked, if a scaffolding pole goes through one of them, just pushing it back into place really doesn't work. And this is back in 2014. And before that, sadly, there'd been some vandalism in the church. Magnificent memorial to Major Cox, who was killed in the Battle of Lewes. A very expensive, but equally painted glass memorial. It had bits of it smashed out. So it came together that the repair of the window and the repair of this memorial would be carried out at the same time by the Salisbury Glass Conservation Workshops.
I believe you went on a visit to Salisbury Cathedral stained glass to see the restoration. Can you describe what you saw there?
In August 2018 we went to the workshops to see Sam Kelly and his team doing an absolute wonderful job, and he showed us some of the work they were doing on the main windows, which it turned out hadn't been that well made in the Victorian era. The parts of where the glass hadn't been accurately cut enough had been filled in with bits of matchstick and odd bits of paper, and some of the glass had been destroyed. So there's beautiful work being done on producing matching glass, painted to match and fired. If ever you get a chance to go and visit, go and visit. The work they do is absolutely wonderful, and I'm sure there will always be work for true craftsmen, as they are. Craftsmen, they're artists.
The artists who decorated this church were clearly inspired by its beautiful natural surroundings. Look closely at this rose window. Not only is the tracery shaped like the petals of a flower, but it is glazed with flowered glass. The encaustic tiles on the floor have a flower design, and there are over 5,000 creamy white flowers hidden in the tiles decorating the nave wall. As we leave Itchen Stoke, we'll head up the Candover Valley to visit our next church. We'll drive past watercress beds on the way. Candover means beautiful stream, and as you can see, the water is gin clear. This spring-fed chalk stream maintains a constant temperature in the summer and winter, perfect conditions for growing watercress all year round. It's also the perfect location for the Winchester Distillery, a craft spirits manufacturer tucked beside the watercress beds in Old Alresford. The Latin name for watercress means twisted nose, referring to the effect on the nose from eating the peppery plants, and the distillery's signature gin, called Twisted Nose, is flavoured with 10 botanicals, including juniper and locally grown watercress.
The trail goes back 800 years now to St Mary the Virgin Old Church, Preston Candover. The medieval church was demolished in 1885, but you can still see its footprint in the churchyard.
Here's Sheila, a volunteer at St Mary's Old Church. How was the west wall rebuilt?
Well, actually, it's a total Victorian hodgepodge of bits and pieces. The door, I think, was an old original door which they carefully undid and then reconstructed there, because you can see they've tried to get the long and the short big bricks at the bottom, and the arch is obviously an old arch. And above that there is something which anybody's guess really, but it could be an inverted sundial. Don't ask me how it works. And then you can see bits of an old gravestone, bits of old window, bits of old pillar perhaps. And then above it all there's a Victorian bell tower with a single bell in it, which does ring.
What was this tiny church used for?
Well, it was originally the chancel of the church, but when the Victorians moved up and built the new church up the hill, they turned it into a mortuary chapel. And a mortuary chapel is where the body of a dead person would lie waiting for the funeral. Inside the chapel, there are two hearses, one very old one, which would have been carried on the shoulders, and then a more modern one with wheels, which was obviously wheeled around the village.
This floor looks like a patchwork quilt. What is it made from?
Well, again, it's typical Victorian put together. There are some medieval tiles, which are the oldest bits of it, which must be from the very early church. And then there are gravestones. Now, these gravestones, I think many of them must have come from outside. I can imagine the Victorians saying, mortuary chapel, good idea to line it with gravestones. But you can see the irregular lines at the bottom of many of the stones, which suggest that they were under the earth. So it's a very interesting floor, very varied.
Have a look in any hedgerow on the drive between Preston Candover and St Nicholas Church Freefolk, and you'll most likely find a prickly blackthorn bush. From late summer, you'll be able to spot its fruit, dark purple sloes. Don't eat them. Sloes won't poison you, but they are too bitter and sour to eat raw. Instead, harvest them and make sloe gin. You won't need a still, as you can cold infuse the flavour by pricking the sloe skins with a blackthorn or a silver needle, packing them in a jar with caster sugar and gin, storing it in a cool dark place and shaking it occasionally. After a year, if you can wait that long, strain off the liquor and enjoy.
There has been a church here at Freefolk for centuries. The walls and the roof that we see here today date from the 13th century, whilst the windows are 15th century. The church here has evolved over the centuries according to the taste and means of the owners. And Brenda Bond is going to describe what they've done inside the church. What's the first thing we'll see when we go inside, Brenda?
Well, the first thing we'll see is a painting of St. Christopher, who welcomed 15th century travellers as they entered the church. This picture was exposed, having been covered by 3 frescoes.
There's a fantastic Jacobean tomb in here as well.
Oh, that's Sir Richard Powlett.
That's a great effigy of Sir Richard. Is that his armour on top of his tomb?
Actually, the helmet and spur were not part of his armour. The helmet is 15th century, the spur is 16th century, and they were placed on his tomb at a later date. I will add that that is a plastic replica that we actually have in the church at the moment.
And there's a beautiful stained glass window on the east side. Who does it commemorate?
It's a 20th century window, and it's dedicated to the Portal family, who were the paper makers at Laverstoke Mill.
Henri Portal was a Huguenot refugee who transformed Laverstoke into a paper mill in the 18th century. He must have been successful because in 1724 he won a contract for the exclusive supply of watermark paper to the Bank of England for printing banknotes. The paper for English banknotes continued to be produced at Laverstoke until 1963, as the mill was handed down through the Portal family from father to son. Laverstoke Mill then fell into disuse until 2010, when it was purchased by the Bombay Spirits Company. The company restored the mill and installed these 2 stills called Thomas and Mary, as well as 2 larger stills called Henry and Victoria. They make Bombay Sapphire gin here using their unique vapour infusion process. As well as juniper, the gin is favoured with 10 exotic botanicals, including Moroccan cubeb berries and West African grains of paradise. Examples of the 10 botanicals are displayed in 2 glass houses designed by Thomas Heatherwick. He was inspired by the curving lines of the gin stills, and they are heated using recycled waste heat from the still house. It's been lovely taking you on our virtual gin trail through the Hampshire Downs. We visited 4 churches and met the volunteers who care for them and shared their lovely stories. We visited 2 gin distilleries, and we spotted the flowers that grow in the hedgerows, the rivers and on the downs on our way. I hope that when circumstances permit, you'll download the Gin Trail map from the CCT website
and follow the gin trail for yourselves and see these things. Goodbye.